Hey guys, Andy here from Mediocre Hobbies coming at you with more glorious old world content. I keep getting slightly concerned that you guys are going to get fed up with the continuous bombardment of old world from my channel. I'm just so very excited by it, and I'm very much engrossed in it in both my personal hobby and now of course my professional hobby as well. But the comments seem to suggest that you guys are more than happy to take as much content about the old world as I'm willing to give, and I'm willing to give quite a lot. This week, I am kind of fighting my way through the last bits and pieces of my 1,000-point list that I'm taking to a tournament this Saturday. It is going to be the first old world tournament run here in Ireland. It is being held in Underworld Gaming, and a fantastic independent stockist here in Dublin. They have quite a gigantic events hall, and they run events every single weekend, whether you enjoy card games or board games or miniature wargaming or whatever. I'm sure they have events on for you. So they are taking to the old world this weekend, and I'm very much in attendance. I'm actually going to be TOing the event, which I'm not really sure what that entails, but we'll figure that out together. And I'm going to be taking the glorious Bretonnians. So of course I'm fighting my way through painting an entire Bretonnian army. Well, 1,000 points of it, but 1,000 points of Bretonnians is like 2,000 points of any other army, right? So I'm going quite fine. Everything is ticking along beautifully. All I have left to do really is the Grail Knights. And Grail Knights are such a beautiful and important part of the army, and they deserve the reverence of lavishing as much time as I can personally give on them as I can. Now, having said that, I'm usually only getting an hour or two in the evening to fight through, and I've only got 5 days left to paint 5 Grail Knights. Do I think I can paint a Grail Knight an evening throughout the week and get them finished? No. So what I decided to do is I decided to turn it into content. So we're going to call this Grail Knight week. Each and every day this week, I'm going to make a video painting up a different Grail Knight in a different Bretonnian color scheme. So by the end of the week, not only will I have an awesome unit of Bretonnian Grail Knights painted up, but you guys will have 5 additional Bretonnian Knight color schemes that you can draw from and paint up your own ones. So hopefully you guys are going to find this interesting. Obviously, like I said, I'm going to lavish a lot more detail on these than I would a standard Knight. I really want to make them stand out on the tabletop and feel pretty special. Hopefully you guys enjoy this kind of content. If you do, make sure you give the video a like. Before I get into it, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of my patrons. You guys are unreal. Without you guys' continued support, I would not be able to keep these cameras on or the lights rolling. That's the wrong way around, but you know what I meant. So yeah, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. If you're interested in getting involved with that yourself, there's links in the description below. Access to a private Discord server and an extra video every single week are just 2 of the awesome benefits for being involved. Okay, now without further ado, let's get painting my first Grail Knight. So I decided to start day 1 of Grail Knight week heavy, and I just went straight in for the banner. I've recently learned that the banners are placed in the very front of all units these days. Obviously they're placed in the front of all units, but in the middle. So in a lance formation, the banner is actually the first model to hit the lance. So I think it's very cool looking. It's like everyone is following the banner into battle. So I decided I would start that way today, start with the banner, and then work my way back through the units. So we'll do the musician of the champion in tomorrow's video. As you can see, it is a beautiful model. The Grail Knights are really something special, and I did want to lavish attention and time on them, and I did get nervous that I was going to have to rush them to get them done for this event. And I just didn't want to do that. So like I said at the beginning, I'm going to mix 2 things together, what I want to get done and content, and try and make a Grail Knight week. Every day we are going to be working on a separate Grail Knight, giving it its own unique color scheme. And having already seen how this miniature turns out at the end, I am really pleased that I did, because I am quite proud of the final result. And I am excited to see after 5 days what the other 4 members of the unit look like as a squad. And obviously the 6th member of that particular lance formation is going to be a damsel that I'm working on as well after hours. So I'm excited to paint her up as well. So for this particular scheme, I'm going to go for the kind of, it is one of the more traditional schemes. It is in a lot of the artwork. And it's like a quartered red and blue scheme. So obviously it's front left barding, back right barding is red, and then back left barding is blue, and then front right barding is blue as well. And then the shields are the opposite inside of that. So one of the things that I did have to challenge myself with a little bit when doing this is obviously they have come with embossed shields. So when it gets down to the time where I have to apply transfers, I have to try and make the transfers match the embossed shield a little bit. And then I realized that I also made a mistake in the fact that I've given the banner bearer and the champion the same embossed shield. So that was a little bit silly of me. So I'll have to try and figure that out when I get to painting him, which will probably be tomorrow. First thing I did was I grabbed some red contrast. I went for Flesh Tears Red and applied that as the first coat on the barding of the horse. The horse was also sprayed black and then sprayed grey seer, if you're wondering how I primed the miniature. Talazar blue was then the blue contrast I brought in to shade the other parts. Another interesting thing I'm going to do, because these miniatures mean quite a lot to me and I want them to be, like, I've owned these for honestly 20 years. They were, I'm very serious with this, the first purchase I made when I worked for Games Workshop. On the very first day working there, this was the first thing that I bought, 2 boxes of Grail Knights. And yeah, it's taking me this long to start painting them, so I wanted them to be super nice. So with that in mind, I know I normally stick with Games Workshop paints when I'm painting Games Workshop miniatures, but I honestly am really pleased with the results that I get when I paint with Duncan's paints. That I think my plan is to base coat and wash them all with Games Workshop paint. So I'll use contrast and obviously normal metallics and Nuln Oil to shade them all and kind of get the tones to match. And then I'm going to go in with Duncan's paints, I think, for the majority of these knights for the layering process. Now, something I said a minute ago is super important for this, and that's the tone of the miniature. One of the things that obviously it's kind of a little bit worrying when you're painting Bretonnians, especially if you're not a particularly good painter like me, like just an average tabletop painter. I know what kind of painter I am. I'm very pleased with the level of painting that I am because I get models done, I get armies done. But tone is so important. And a lot of people out there are tone deaf, and I don't necessarily mean, you know, from singing. I mean, maybe you're tone blind. But if you get tones that match, so if I get this red and blue here and I finish up painting this knight and it is one particular tone, and then I get another model, let's say I go for yellow and black as another one, and that's a different tone, they sit next to each other, they're gonna look awful. So even though I'm gonna do the unit in all different colors, I have to make sure that the kind of sweeping tone of the unit matches. Now, that doesn't matter so much when I'm doing different units. So for instance, the 2 painted units I have so far is 1 unit of Knights of the Realm in this kind of bluey grey scheme, and then I have a whole other unit of Knights Errant, and they're done in a kind of burgundy and cream scheme or sandy scheme. The tones on those don't need to match because they're 2 separate units. They sit separate in the battlefield, so it wouldn't be too noticeable if the tones didn't match. But if they were side by side in a unit, I think it is. And I think if you look at a lot of people's Bretonnian armies out there who are, let's say, subpar painters like me, not saying I'm not putting myself up on a pedestal and saying people are bad painters, I just think it's something that a lot of people don't take into consideration. Whereas if you see like an heavy metal style Bretonnian army and you pay attention to a block of knights that they've painted in all the different color schemes, you will notice that the tones match the whole way through, and that's why they look so good together. Let me know what you guys think about that in the comments. It's obviously something I've been thinking about quite a lot. I think I'm correct in saying it, but if there's better painters out there, more competition painters or just higher level standard painters out there that want to enlighten me a little bit more about this or have their own opinions on this, please feel free to share that in the comments below. The more I know, the more I can learn, the more I can pass that information back out to people. And also people like engaging in conversation in the comments. So feel free to open up dialogue and let me know what you think. So obviously I've put the red and blue on. I've used Gargak Sewer for all of the barding, and now moving over to the metallics. I'm going to use obviously Lead Belcher for all of the armor and chainmail and chains and stuff like that, his helmet. And then I'm going to move over to Retributor Armor Gold for all of the gold detail. And obviously the Grail Knights are going to have quite a lot of gold detail, as they are Grail Knights. They're the highest ranking order. These guys have literally met the Lady of the Lake and drank from her chalice, which has given them some fairly supernatural powers. I've actually just finished up reading the beautiful new Graham McNeill novel about Bretonnians, the first old world novel. There's a Grail Knight in that book, and I'm not going to say anything because I do not want to spoil it, but my thinking on what a Grail Knight is has changed drastically after reading that book. I wish I could have a conversation with a group of people about that particular topic, what a Grail Knight is, and because I think it's changed slightly now based on that novel. It's kind of crazy. So yeah, I definitely have a lot of reverence for Grail Knights before, and I have even more now. Obviously I threw a little bit of Black Templar across the entire horse as well. I'm not going to go into detail too much about the horse or how I do it or what I'm going to do with it. Everyone's going to paint their horses their own way, their own style. And I tend to not focus too much on horses when it comes to painting Bretonnians, because so much of it is covered up and so much of your attention is pulled away by the beautiful knight on top, that I tend to just leave them contrasted and washed, and nobody seems to notice at all. I grabbed the Nuln Oil after all of the base coats were on and applied this to the entire miniature, and like I said, when I go through the entire process of painting all these knights throughout this week, I'll probably use the same shade to kind of pull them all into the same direction, and then obviously layer them up in different directions after that. So null oil obviously shades down things like the metallics really well. It does work on everything else pretty well, except it looks a little bit like Arsenal right now, which didn't make me happy. Not that I have anything against Arsenal, I don't really like football at all, but I didn't want my Bretonnians to look like football teams. That's obviously why the layering is going to be important. So after the shade is dried, now add some texture paint. I use some AK Dark Earth texture paste. It's my go-to for pretty much the old world these days. This is when I moved over to Duncan's paint. So I'm going to start with the Elysium blue and the Celestial blue. So this is the mid-tone and the high tone in that blue triad. Obviously didn't use the base coat because I used the contrast for that. And I'm going to very carefully start the layering up process. Now, the way I tend to layer up with Duncan's paints on things like Bretonnian Knights and other kind of fabricy stuff is the mid-tone is kind of put on as more of a solid coat, as you can see. I'm just trying to get the color kind of really established. So it tends to be a little bit heavier than you would expect. This was almost a little bit too kind of gray bluey for me. I almost did not want this tone. I wanted something a little bit more rich and more vibrant. But knowing myself and knowing how Duncan's paints perform, I definitely just wanted to follow through to the end with the 2 coats of blue and the 2 coats of red, and then basically decide how I feel from there. And I was not disappointed, so don't worry about this. If you're not too happy about this blue tone right now, just stick with the video and see how it turns out for yourself. So with the blue applied, it was time to move over to the brighter of the 2 blues. Can't remember the name of it now. Celestial blue is the brightest one, yeah. So Elysium blue and then Celestial blue. And with this, as you can see, my brush strokes aren't like smooth. It's almost like I'm kind of dabbing or scratching at the miniature. As I'm trying to give the illusion of texture. Obviously this is a fabric, so I don't want this solid blocky coat of paint on. That's where it's once again going to push the miniature looking more towards like a toy. And I've said that before, but if you just have solid blocks of flat color, miniatures start to look like toys as opposed to miniature or game miniatures. I don't know. So as you can see, I go in with these kind of streaky strokes because the solid coat underneath is giving me the color and this is just giving me the texture. Obviously it's going to highlight it as well and kind of punch up that color a little bit more. But I found this technique to be, I don't know, it just really works for me. I'm really happy with the final result of it. It's something you could use on like animal hide and stuff as well. You know, you get dark brown, then you can do kind of slightly solider coat for the mid-tone, but then when you get to the final highlight, you're going to want for that scratchy look to kind of give the illusion of fur. It's all up to you whether that's the way you want to do it. But with the 2 blues now done, it was time to move over to the Sanguine Scarlet and the Demon Red for highlighting up the red parts. As you can see, it does jump quite violently up in the red tones, which is exactly what I wanted because this red and this blue were not sitting well together. So I was glad that it definitely punched up that color nice and bright. And just like I talked about before, the mid-tone color is going to get applied as a fairly solid coat. We will leave of course, all the deepest recesses nice and shaded, and obviously the higher points is where we're going to hit the majority of the paint. But as goes the brush strokes themselves, we want it to be fairly solid. Going around all the barding, taking your time. Obviously remembering that the transition between the 2 colors is at the top of this neck, and it's basically the only part on the horse that the 2 colors actually meet as a direct line. There's either barding or shields or other parts that separate them. Throughout the rest of the miniature, literally only the bend in the horse's neck where those colors have to meet, and you have to take your time and make sure those lines are kind of neat and tidy and even, if you know what I mean. As you see, I flip the miniature over. I'm going with the kind of folds in the fabric that go around the neck and making sure that they stay nice and dark, and then you get highlighted correctly moving further away. And then obviously we're going to hit the banner and start highlighting that. Obviously the folds on the 3 kind of tassely bits that run back, I want to make sure that they stay nice and highlighted, that in those creases we do leave some darkness. So it is, like I said, not just one solid red coat making it look kind of silly. A little bit of darkness really does help to break it all up. From here it's time to move over to the second coat, which is the Demon Red, the brighter of the 2. And this is where we are going to go in with that same kind of scratchy highlighting, giving us that illusion of texture and really setting that tone off. Once I saw that red bit done at the bottom next to the blue quarter shield there, I was happy. I knew this was definitely a scheme and a tone that I was going to love. Originally I was planning on doing an entire unit of knights in this color. In fact, before I decided to do this video series, when I decided to do my Grail Knights, I knew I was going to have to rush them. They were all going to be a single color, like, you know, the entire unit is going to be the same color. A lot of people were against it, but I was kind of like, I'm kind of against the clock here. I don't really have time to do this in my own personal time. So once again, another reason why I'm happy that I get to do it as a little micro video series is not only get to paint the thing that I want to paint, but I get to paint it the way I want to paint it as well. So now all you guys need to do is make sure you watch all the videos so the time spent is worth it and my views don't go through the floor. So that bit's on you. You won't let me down, will you? Please don't let me down. Already super happy with how it's looking. And with the final highlights done to the rest of it, the red is looking nice. After that, we're going to move over to Catachan Flesh to layer up all the barding, belts, buckles, all those other bits and pieces on the horse. We're going to take our time and do the same thing as the final highlight of the red and blue. This is where we're going to get that kind of scratchy effect to give that illusion of texture. I really do enjoy this Catachan Flesh over Gargak Sewer kind of leather look. I've been doing it on all the barding on all of my horses for Bretonnia, which means that even when you put the army together, there are these certain colors and tones that match. So all the metallics are going to be the same, gold, all the browns and leathers are going to be the same. Obviously the basic material is going to be the same, which even though the rest of the knights are going to be all different colors, it really does help pull them all together. This is where I kind of do things in the wrong order because I didn't realize I was going to have to use Ironbreaker twice. So I apply Ironbreaker here now to highlight all of the metallics across the horse. So obviously all the little shields across his bridling and stuff like that, and then the horse himself, so the knight himself, so all his plate mail got done, his chain mail, and all those bits and pieces. If you watch a bunch of my videos, you do know that I tend to highlight all my gold with silver as well, using a little bit of touch highlight. Because I've got a little bit more reverence for these guys, I definitely wanted to go in with a slightly different kind of gold color and spend more time kind of being more careful and giving it a more kind of controlled highlight with that. So many, I love all the silver shield. I really think it does help break up all that color. So what I did was I grabbed some full bright copper and I highlighted up the gold. Now, it did actually look really well. I was happy with the color the gold had turned. It definitely felt very Bretonnian-esque, nice polished, but still quite worn. Metallics. These guys are hard-fought knights. They've been in war for most of their lives, but it was sitting just a little bit fat for my liking. So I ended up going back to the Ironbreaker paint as well. So if you're going to do this or follow my steps to follow the same thing, what I would do is I would obviously do the gold first and then go with the Ironbreaker as one solid coat on all the metallics and then touch up all the gold and stuff at the same time. As you see, I'm using that same thing. The full bright copper was kind of a solid coat, and then going in with the silver, adding that texture, a few scratchy highlights with the silver, just to make it pop a little bit more on the miniature. I'll obviously do this on all the gold across the whole thing. After that, we added transfers. I chose these golden dragons breathing fire, as there is a dragon breathing fire on his shield. They were yellow, which had me worried a little bit that they were going to be the wrong tone, but they definitely sat really well, especially over the red. I think that looks so nice. Now, obviously, I don't usually varnish miniatures these days because plastic, they don't need to be. This guy is on a plastic horse with everything else on his metal. So I did in fact add a spray varnish here. That was the transition there. So these are now varnished up, finished up apart from basing material, which I'm going to do as across the entire army in one go. I do have some high resolution images of what the knight actually looks like finished and on a tabletop. So I hope you guys did enjoy this. You learned a little bit about painting a Grail Knight, and you like this particular color scheme, and you're looking forward to the other 4 color schemes that we will do over the course of the next 4 days. Okay guys, and there we have it. Day 1 of Grail Knight week, that's what I'm going to call it, why not, is complete. I did decide to challenge myself and get I feel the most complicated miniature out of the way on Monday, just to make sure that this whole week was possible. It took about 7 hours to paint the Grail Knight banner bearer to the standard that I took him to today. And I've got 10 Grail Knights to paint in total. I'm only doing 5 for the tournament, but I have 10 to paint in total. That means it's going to take nearly 2 full working weeks to paint up that squad. 70, that's a lot of time, but I think it's going to be worth it. I'm really pleased with the final result. Hope you guys are as well. If you are, make sure you give the video a like. Ask me any question you want in the comments below. Help me out with other schemes. Like I said, all the schemes for this particular one are going to be different. So I have to come up with 4 other schemes for the rest of the squad. So I'm excited to try and figure that out as well. So let me know in the comments below. And make sure that you're subscribed to the channel to keep updated with all the old world content that I will be producing for the next for the foreseeable future. A little bit too much. Thank you guys so much for sticking around at the end of the video. I'll see you in the next one.